audience for their patience. And we will call the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee to order for Monday, December 16. Today we acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. We are thankful to share in the special spirit of this place, rich in the energy of Mother Earth, our ancestors, and the love of all creation. I look for a motion to adopt the agenda, that the content of the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee agenda for December 16, 2019 be adopted as presented. Deputy Mayor.
So moved.
Seconder, Councillor Madigan, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Council, any declarations of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof before we get going? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that position as we progress, please let us know. For tonight's session, this is our third SIC meeting with respect to the 2020 budget. And so what I propose to do is move right to public delegations. There's a maximum of 5 minutes per delegation, and I would ask anyone to come forward and speak to the 2020 budget at this time before we get into our actual discussions. Good evening, Ms. Cook.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of Council. My name is Susan Cook, and I have the pleasure of speaking to you this evening on behalf of the Blue Mountain Foundation for the Arts. As well as a copy of my presentation, you have 2 testimonials in your package, and I'm happy to take questions about either of them. Now allow me to read the following quote found online. "Before a child speaks, it sings. Before they write, they paint. As soon as they stand, they dance. Art is the basis of human expression." The BMFA was incorporated in the spring of 1975, and from that time on, we have endeavored to provide the community with cultural events and creative opportunities of self-expression. Over the past 45 years, the BMFA has evolved, as has the community, each working to reflect community needs and interests. It is always a work in progress. Our mission statement is to inspire excellence in visual arts through educational and creative opportunities, and we support and encourage artists in a variety of mediums. How do we reach our goals? Through our programs and events. Each year we present quality programming to engage and educate artists of all ages, provide a public gallery space for community, and organize special events to showcase the arts. What are the benefits to the community? In just the past 10 years, approximately 200 people in our community have received cash awards or prizes totaling $70,000, all raised through donations and sponsorship. Artists have been launched, community groups have been enabled, and youth artwork admired. We hold 10 exhibits each year, art talks and workshops, have dedicated display space for youth in need, and art in the community program facilitate youth art classes, hold special events, and run a gift shop. We also collaborate with other nonprofits such as Home Horizons, and you will have seen a reference to that in the testimonial from Ann Clifford. This year we are making a special request for funding for the Collingwood Arts and Music Festival. It moved to Simcoe Street last year and showcased over 45 artists and artisans, 4 local bands, children's theatre, art activities, Fleetwood dance, and local authors. This year, on Saturday, June 27th, we anticipate 50 to 60 local artists, 6 local bands, 7 to 10 authors, and more. They will be supported by more than 20 volunteers. Neighboring businesses will all benefit from the activity. The participants are local taxpayers. They also happen to be supporters and creators of art. Many are micro businesses endeavoring to sell their product, and we are seeking your support. Over recent years, with significant marketing efforts made by other organizations, donor fatigue has become an issue in raising the funds we need to continue introducing and delivering events. Arts and culture are seen as a vital component of the town's 2020 vision, of which we are an integral part and hope to be in the future. We continue to raise funds that we have in the past, but are looking to you to support the BMFA in the 2020 budget by contributing $10,000 toward the Collingwood Arts and Music Festival. Funds will be used for staging, which comes in pieces, musicians, technical support, tents, equipment, marketing, and advertising. The total cost for this festival is $16,000 to $18,000, and we are happy to answer any questions, and thank you for entertaining our request.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other delegations who would like to speak to the 2020 budget? All right, then we will get into budget discussions. 4.1. So, Council, the way I'm hoping we can proceed tonight is that we would address first the base budget, as we have had put before us by Treasury and staff. We would deal also with the item including the reserve top-up, 900,000, then the capital levy, 0.75%, and then we would drop down into service enhancements, and we have a shopping list that the treasurer has distributed for us. Starting off first then with the base budget, are there any questions or comments for staff before we get into dealing with a motion for the base budget recommendation? Councillor Hamlin.
Do I understand the request includes 2 full-time equivalent persons to be added in the base budget?
I'll look through to the treasurer. Marjorie?
Through you, your worship, that is correct. One is in water and one is a procurement coordinator under growth.
And is there an estimate as to the cost of those 2 positions combined?
Marjorie?
Through you, worship, the cost of the procurement person is approximately $72,000, and that'll depend on when that person gets hired. And I'll look to Peggy to see what the cost of the water supervisor estimate was.
Through your worship, the estimate is approximately $90,000.
And just for clarification, the water employee is rate-based supported and the procurement person would be tax-based?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Council, any other questions or comments? Then I am looking for a motion that the, or recommendation. I'm just looking for a motion here. Yes, I see it. That would be confirmed tomorrow. So just so everyone's clear, this is an SIC meeting, so all motions adopted tonight are would be ratified or subject to change tomorrow at the special council meeting, which will be in this hall at 5:30 tomorrow. So does somebody want to put a recommendation? Councillor Madigan.
I would recommend that we adopt the base budget and put it towards council meeting tomorrow.
We have a seconder. Councillor McLeod.
I have a question
Okay.
actually,
All
so
right.
I'm going to wait
So-
for a seconder.
Councillor Berman, you'll second that, and Councillor McLeod, you have a question.
Just to clarify, so we were provided with several scenarios and different base budget costings. Which one are we talking about here that we're voting on?
The base budget is a tax levy of $33,080,556.
Thank you.
I'll look to the treasurer just to confirm that, so we're all on the same page.
That is correct, your worship.
Okay, so that's what's on the floor now. Good. Okay, any questions or comments? Seeing none, I will call the vote then for the base budget of the tax levy of $33,080,556. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Then progressing through the sheet that we have been provided by staff, the revised items include the increased inquiry estimate to $1 million, which involves a tax levy of $90,000 to be put into reserve to top up our reserves. Any questions or comments about that? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. My question through to the treasurer was just to confirm if it's possible that if we provide for the $900,000 and we don't need it for the judicial inquiry, that it would go back from whence it came to the working capital contingency as opposed to going to the life cycle. And I understand that through this budget process, that could be attached to that.
Right, so I think you're referring to the excess municipal growth assessment, so are we not? I'm gonna look to Marjorie then to make sure.
Through you, your worship, we have established a $900,000 increase to the costs for the judicial inquiry, and I believe that if there are any, so that would provide us with a total of $1 million to cover any judicial inquiry costs. And what we don't use there, Councillor Jeffrey is asking that it be returned to the working capital reserve fund. And that is the reserve fund that we maintain for disasters and one-time expenses and those types of things. And it may in fact, if there are a lot of granting opportunities that are coming around this year, it would behoove us to build that up again.
Okay. That's just Councillor Jeffrey?
Yes.
That's great.
Are you looking for recommendations for each of the items or just for discussion or questions?
Well, we're going through, yes, so we'd be looking for recommendations on each of the individual items. We've dealt with the base budget, so the revised items, then we'll deal with the capital levy, and then we'll go into service enhancements. Is the way I'm anticipating it.
Alright.
Okay. Do you have a recommendation?
Well, I have 5 that I would support right now.
Dealing with the revised item for the, to top up the reserve.
Oh, yes, I would support that. I would
Okay.
move that
So
recommendation.
you move that?
Yeah.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Berman, any questions or comments? Councillor McLeod?
I will ask a question about this because I'm a little concerned about adding it to the tax levy as another $60 to the average residential tax cost when I wonder if there's a way that we could get this money some other way. Perhaps we could borrow it from development charges. I think that has been done in the past as a method of raising much needed funds. It happens, I think, pretty often as a matter of fact, or I could be mistaken on that case. Is there a way we could do this instead from internal borrowing rather than putting it on the taxpayer immediately?
Marjorie?
Through you, your worship, we cannot borrow from the development charge fund. The development charges reserve funds can borrow within themselves, but not externally out to operations for the community. We have, the largest reserves that we do have are water and wastewater. And within the next couple of years, we will be paying out a significant amount of those funds in terms of our portions for the wastewater treatment and the water treatment plant expansion. So we may be holding it off for 1 or 2 years, but eventually it's going to come from the taxpayer.
As a supplementary, your worship, so you're saying we could take it, we could borrow it internally from some other place besides development charges? We could borrow it from water or wastewater, we could do internal borrowing to cover this?
Through you, your worship, we could, but those internal reserve funds, because they are reserve funds and by their nature require they have a component of income to them, which means we'd have to pay ourselves interest. So we would be basically increasing what we've got to pay back, and hopefully we wouldn't need those funds until the last minute we get them back.
Supplemental to that, your worship, so the thought here that I'm trying to understand is that we are borrowing, we've got $100,000 in the budget right now for paying some of the judicial inquiry. And we have $900,000 more that we're discussing, but this $900,000 will not end up being in the budget in perpetuity. This is a one-time thing. So there's theoretically, another way to describe it would be a levy, like an extra levy almost. We could almost treat it as it is our capital, as we treat our capital levy. Like we're looking at $60 on a household, whereas the capital levy currently at 0.75% is going to be $17.70. So this is a pretty hefty surcharge that we're kind of looking at. Is that basically, this is one time only is what I'm asking?
Yeah, through you, your worship, yes, this is one time only. I would also point out that at this point in time, there may be funds left over out of that amount, I don't know, but we have absolutely no reserve money left. So we're going to need to, in the future, probably increase the contributions to those reserves to build them back up to where they were, just to keep us going.
Thank you, I think so.
All right. Any other questions or comments on this item? We have a mover and a seconder. I will call the vote then. All in favor of the increase of 900,000 to the judicial inquiry? That is carried unanimously. And that takes us down then to the capital levy of 0.05%. Marjorie, I think you told us that amounts to about $264,000 or so.
Through you, your worship, yes, it's roughly between 262, 264.
And this goes into the capital asset life cycle thing for the asset management plan, yes?
Through you, your worship, we do actually maintain a separate division within the life cycle reserve. We've divided it out between roads or linear assets and buildings and equipment. So we do actually have a separate section called special capital levy, and if we need to draw on that, we would come back to council and tell them what we were doing with it.
Good, thank you. Council, any comments or questions? Councillor McLeod?
May I ask, through you, your worship, to the treasurer, how much is in that fund currently?
Marjorie?
Through you, your worship, it is off the top of my head, it will be approaching 600 and change at the end of this year.
600,000?
Yes.
And again, what was the name of that, if you don't mind, the name of that
Marjorie?
particular reserve fund?
It's actually a component or a section set aside within the life cycle replacement, life cycle replacement reserve fund.
Another one, if that's all right.
ahead,
So I'm looking at reserve funds in general, and I understand this is maybe a tiny bit off topic, but on the budget highlights that you provided to us, estimated reserves as at December 31st, 2019, $60,141,331. I'm comparing that with what we were told when we did budgets last time on March the 7th of 2019, which was $65,797,531. So the difference between the 65 million last year and the 60 million that we're sitting on right now is the judicial inquiry, even though we put some back in through the course of last year's budget, or did we deplete those reserve funds some other way?
There's some statutory and some discretionary. Marjorie, can you take us through those, please?
Yeah, through you, your worship. The development charge reserve funds are the largest component of the reserves, and they are approximately, now I'm going off of memory, but they're approximately $22 to $23 million. The second largest component of the reserves and the reserve funds are the water and the wastewater funds. And they, I believe, wastewater was 17 million, and I think water was 7 million. So those were the vast majority of the reserves. There still continues to be a federal gas tax, which is a statutory. There is a building stabilization fund, which is statutory. Building stabilization has about 1.2. I believe the federal gas tax has 1.7 the last time I looked. And there are other minor and associated ones that go along with it, like we have the OSIF funding that we've carried forward for the roads. We have, in terms of reserve funds, discretionary reserve funds, we have items such as the 10% non-DC component, which I believe had $900,000 or $800,000. We have not done the allocations yet for 2019. We're waiting on the payables to come in. So we maintain $1 million in the land acquisition reserve fund. There were funds in the waterfront master plan reserve fund. There were funds in the life cycle replacement reserve fund, which we tend to attempt to maintain at 2 years worth of the funding for that. So virtually all of the funding is the reserves are spoken for in terms.
And so through you, your worship, the capital levy that we're discussing tonight, the 0.75%, is $200,000 and some odd that we're going to put into the life cycle reserve fund. If you had your druthers, would that be a higher number than 0.75%?
Through you, your worship, I think when we took a look at the asset management functions that Dennis were showing us at the last meeting, excuse me, you can see that we really do need to have more money going into that asset management plan. However, I think that because we've depleted all of our other discretionary emergency type reserves, it might be more important to consider those first than the capital levy itself, because we are saving it up. As I believe it was Councillor Jeffrey the last time around that said asked us to kind of separate that within that life cycle reserve.
Last
More
one, I
questions?
swear.
There we go.
So the base budget that we've just said that we support, how many of the base budget dollars that we've just said yes to are going into reserves? Uh-oh.
$1,571,000 plus $100,000 from Ross's budget, $5,500 from the $25,000 from the IT budget, $2,500 I believe from arts and culture, and $50,000 into the general reserve, and $60,000 will go as an ordinary transfer into the life working capital. Sorry.
What was that first number again? I'm sorry. And I'm amazed that you can deliver those.
It was 1.5 something million.
$1,571,000.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions, council, on this item? I don't think I have a mover and a seconder for the levy of 0.75%. Oh, Councillor Madigan, Councillor Berman. Any other questions or comments before I call the vote? Councillor Jeffrey.
Sorry. I thought we were looking at going from 16.84 to 17.85, and now I'm looking at 23, 26.
You're looking at scenario 3 on this sheet.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's with the 0.75% capital levy. Marjorie, can you help on that?
Through your worship, the first scenario is the base budget where we have $32.80 in that reduction.
Yeah.
Scenario 2 is the inclusion of.
It's okay. I was reading it wrong.
Okay.
It's okay. Thank you. Got it.
Good.
Sorry.
Okay. So unless there's any comments or questions, I will call the vote on the levy. Keeping the levy at the same amount it was last year, 0.75%. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Okay, so this is probably where the dust up starts. So now we're looking at enhancements, and just some background for council. The scenarios that I asked the treasurer to look at were at varying rates of tax levy increases, so 1%, 1.5%, 2%. Scenario 5 was the 1%, and so based on where we are right now, to stay under the 1% levy rate, we have approximately $700,000 as an envelope for service enhancements. And that's really just not to predetermine any outcome, but to set the table for the discussion, so that people know where we're working ourselves towards. If we're trying to stay in the 1% rate levy increase, then that's our target. So then turning to service enhancements, I'm open to suggestions how people want to do this. There's 18 operating requests and 11 capital requests, 4 of which on the capital front have been deferred, and there can be questions about that if you like. Would council like just to work our way down the list, or does people feel strongly about certain items they'd like to put on the table first? I'm open to suggestions. Councillor Ham.
I sort of have a big comment, so maybe I'll go first because once that's out of the way. I asked the question about staff in terms of the base budget because I could see from the information that was provided during this last number of meetings we've had that we've added about 3 staff, we've added about 20 staff over the last 3 years, and the base budget will allow us to add another 2, so we'll be at 22. additional staff. The operating requests, if I added up correctly, appear to be 5 further staff, not counting the seasonal park staff, which I don't count. And I also don't count the economic development support person because that's, as I understood it, just a transfer of an existing position. So what I'm suggesting in big terms is that all these positions be put on hold for a year. I think the last year has been very difficult. I would, from my observations from afar from staff, they've had a lot on their plate with the judicial inquiry. There's been a lot of changes, and I would like to see things settle out here for a year before we hire all these more additional staff. Having said that, though, I do have a thought about another staff person who will pay for themselves. Okay, so here it is. I asked a question during this process about what percent of our revenue is covered by a residential tax base, and it's just over 82%, which our treasurer indicated was almost unsustainable, because it means 17% of our budget is carried by our commercial, largely by our commercial industrial tax base, 82% by the residential. And this is fine while residential growth is increasing, because we have assessment every year that's increasing. So even the base increases in our overall budget, cost of living, they're nothing. And if we have special project, it can be picked up. But as soon as that growth slows down, you know, we're going to find ourselves in difficult situation if we don't have more commercial and industrial assessment. So we have to go after it, was my thought on this. I have noticed over the last year some great improvements in our staffing complement. This time last year, Martin Ridlow, who of course is our Director of Marketing and Business Development, wasn't even listed as a staff person on our contact list for the municipality. Now, not only is he listed, but he has a department that's moved, of course, under Director Farr's guidance. And we have, of course, the Mayor's Task Force, which is going to come up with some ideas around business development, and I can't wait for the results of that report that's going to be delivered. But, and here's where I'm coming to. I really believe, and I hope I can encourage others around the table, that we consider going out and finding a person to work with Mr. Ridlow, whose job it would be to go after new assessment for our town in the commercial industrial sector primarily. I know from speaking to one of our young entrepreneurs in town who runs a co-op kind of space where other entrepreneurs come in. He has 3 employees there right now who are really who work for a large company in Toronto, a tech company, but because they want to live here, that company has allowed them to work in Collingwood 3 days a week. That kind of opportunity, if someone had the mandate to go down and actually meet with that large company, might result in an office up here for more staff who would like to work here. Or sometimes I think, why don't we have an office here for the provincial government? And maybe if someone's job was to be proactively going out and looking for those to come into town, they might be watching for opportunities for the province to expand. I know, or I understand that Mr. Ridlow, who works excessive amount of hours and does a fantastic job, is more focused on dealing with a very important part of business development is people coming into the town and needing some guidance and working with those who are here. It's unbelievably important task. But I believe that if we had this kind of person whose job would be to be actively looking for business development opportunities here, once the first year or so goes by, if that person was successful and we had increased assessment, their salaries would be paid for in no time, and then we would have this additional assessment. The advantage, before I finish off, of non-residential assessment is that it requires very little by way of services. they're not looking for, traffic calming measures or parks or more libraries or any of these things that, we struggle with. And so my overall suggestion is we put a hold on the additional 5 staff contemplated through the service enhancements and instead ask for an amount to be set aside, and I don't know what the number is, but staff could come up with it, for a business development person of the kind I've described.
Thank you, Councillor Hammond. Just as a point of clarification, when you reference that this council or town has hired 20 employees, what time frame are you referencing?
It was since 2016. There was a document handed out. I have it here.
And I think some of that would be explained by IT and probably the water coming in-house. So that was existing departments we brought in-house. Okay.
I don't know, I have to see.
So, because I don't think we've gone out and hired 20 new positions during the time I've been on council. All that said, we certainly take your point, and I think that's part of the whole economic development action plan. But I think we were looking at completing the plan. I don't know if the CAO wants to say anything, but certainly that's, if you want to put that motion on the table, you can do that. Okay. So,
It was part of, just to finish off, it was part of what was handed out. It was a list of positions since 2016 that have been added. And it was on a separate piece of paper. And I hope I didn't leave that on, but I'll keep looking for it.
all right. So, and I guess maybe then it's a follow-up question, perhaps we could get clarification on what the economic development SBEC support of $32,000 is. It's item 18 on the operating request. Marjorie, are you able to?
Through you, your worship. In 2016, council did provide a resolution to allow $20,000 cash payments between SBEC and the Small Business Center, the summer company amounts. That was a 1-year basic type of transaction. And subsequent to that, we went to in-kind, providing in-kind services, which includes things like rent, IT support, the accounting, financial support required, HR, procurement, those types of things. They're all in kind. And this year with the funding cut, that the $20,000 cash was discontinued in after the year it was provided. We brought back with the funding cut that the SBEC received this year. They're roughly the town of Collingwood is going to pay $40,000 out of the $52,000 that the funding has basically decreased, and that's what the $32,000 is. They can either cut back on their government-funded programs, or we can kick in the lost dollar amounts.
And that's for the summer grant program, just to be clear?
Through your worship, it's for all. He runs 3 of them. He runs a grant program, the starter company, and SBEC.
That's for all 3 of those programs. Thank you. All right, so we have one suggestion that all new contract positions, I think these are all new contract positions under the operating request, be denied, and we gotta move forward on these enhancements, people. So how do you wanna pick them, put them on the floor and put them to a vote? Councillor Jeffrey?
I have one question, then I'll recommend 5, and if we need to supplement, we can, but these are probably the only 5 I'll be voting for.
Okay.
My first question through Director Culver, the cycling plan would, half of the amount, 30,000, make any kind of, would it be helpful, or is it better just to defer until we can have 60,000 in the budget?
Director Culver?
Through your worship, that amount was an accumulation of some low-hanging fruit in the cycling plan, so any amount would be used. However, deferral would also be acceptable. It doesn't scratch the surface of what we need to get done in the cycling plan if we don't come full, to fulfill it completely.
What does the 60,000 cover? Are you able to tell us?
Through your worship, it covers things like road painting and signage, some trail works that need to be upgraded, things like that.
Okay, thank you. Does that assist Councillor Jeffrey?
It does, thank you. Okay, so I'll just maybe preface, number one, the sound system at the Eddie Bush is a must. I know it's 8,000, but a lot of users use the arena, and we just have to be able to hear what people are saying, and that's an important one for me. The feasibility study for art and culture, I think it only makes sense that we go ahead with that as a municipality and get the information we need. I support SBEC in the economic development of the 32,000, because if we are slow at bringing jobs into town, we at least need to be able to help people create their own jobs as an option. And then as part of a healthy community, and the fact that we just went through a cycling plan to have it in place, that I would support it to an amount, but not to the 60,000. And if need be, and we can't find it anywhere else in the budget, Simcoe Theatre, 6,122.
Councillor Jeffrey, do you have a number on the cycling plan implementation?
Well, I would take it down to 15,000, even if I thought it would be helpful, but 30,000 otherwise was kind of where I was landing, was 50% of the 60 I asked.
All right. That's it. That's all. That's 1, 2, 3. I got 4 there. Did you say 5?
The Simcoe Theatre,
Simcoe Theatre.
the 6,122, I can't believe in a big a budget we have that we can't find it somewhere, but.
If it helps your worship, those are numbers 9, 13, 18, 27, and 29.
Oh, right. Did you say the arts feasibility study?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. So I'm going to look for a seconder, and we can have discussion on those 5 items. Number 9, cycling plan invitation at $30,000. Is there a seconder for that? Deputy Mayor.
Could I make a suggestion? Could we go around the horn? And I like what Councillor Jeffrey has done. Let's play a bit of bingo here. Call out your numbers. And let's just see if we've got like a thread of 2 or 3 that are consistent. Knock them off, and then let's get down to hashing out the rest.
Okay.
I'll start.
No, he gets to start. It's his idea. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
But I wanted to make a comment though regarding staff. So if that means putting the numbers out, then I'm happy to, but I just, and I preface my comments by saying that I came through the council of 10 to 14, in which we now have an inquiry as a result of. And I watched from a distance what the council of 14 to 18 did in terms of moving significant legislation ahead at a municipal level. And part of that was to not only look backwards in terms of what happened, but to look forward in a 1, 5, 10 year sort of envelope as to where we're headed, what we need to really do. And I think, and it's a compliment to the last council, that you took great strides in ensuring that we were maturing as a council and as a municipality and as a corporation, in ensuring that we had the proper staffing at all levels to ensure that we were offering the services and the delivery that our residents and our ratepayers deserve. And that costs money. I'm very proud of the fact that our CAO, through the process of the judicial inquiry, has stood fast and has delivered on recommendations in terms of bringing in some very key uh, portfolios, and then bringing in some really talented people to round them out. And so when I look at some of these things, I see additional supports that will not only just enhance what's there, but really elevate where we want to go. And it's a tough thing to swallow when you're asking for money up front, but I truly believe that we will see some tangible results as a result of some of these staffing complements, not only through our term, but as we go forward, because the workload that we have asked some of our staff, my colleague here to the left, to do in the last couple of years, I think if people truly knew what the picture was, they wouldn't have an issue with the dollars that we're asking them to invest in their corporation. It's easy to pick on staff. It's easy to say, well, staff are overpaid. You know, you're working off of the tax dollar, etc. But the reality is that we are a corporation, we are a municipality in transition, and we are elevating to a higher level, higher standard. And I really think that a lot of these things will continue to move us forward in the direction that's been laid out by the CAO. So those are sort of my overall comments as it relates to staff. So I don't have any issue as it relates to hiring these additional staff members. And I'd be happy to defend when people ask me questions about staffing and the number of people that we've got working in the municipality. I don't have any issue with that. So the numbers, I guess, are, you know, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 with the request for additional legal expenses. I think that given some of the work that we've asked as it relates to the STA bylaw or report that we want coming forward, that's going to be imperative. We hear over and over and over again about traffic and congestion. So I'm not sure how we can take out a calming study when we've repeatedly heard that as an issue from our constituents and here at the table. The parks operator, I need a little bit more clarity as to that. I'm comfortable with Councillor Jeffrey's recommendation as it relates to number 9, and I could go 0 to 60 on that, unattended. Seasonal park staff, I could take that one out. 11 and 12, I have no issue cutting out. 6 or 13, I definitely would keep. 14, I would definitely keep. 15, I would keep. 16, I would keep. 17, the heritage consultant. Again, I think that the work that's being done by staff and the expertise, and as our heritage district continues to mature and grow, it's an economic driver. I think that 10,000 is well spent. 18 is well spent. Want me to carry on?
Yes, go ahead.
I think that the investment in 19 is worth it. I just need further clarification as to exactly what that is, but I think I understand it. And then the big ones that I just want to have a more full conversation about would then relate to the public works and the 7th and the 10th line upgrade. Whether those, if staff could feel that those two could be deferred for a year while we look at the entire accommodation review. And then 24, 25 I would keep, 27 I would certainly keep, and 29 I would keep as well.
Thank you.
So it would have been easier for me just to say what I would not have kept.
That was worth the right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for that, Deputy Mayor. Councillor McLeod, I think you indicated you're ready to go.
I agree with Councillor Jeffrey's suggestion regarding the arts, number 29, the Arts Centre feasibility study, and with Councillor Deputy Mayor Hall as well. Yes, I'm starting at the bottom. I also agree with Councillor Jeffrey's suggestion about the sound system at the Eddie Bush Memorial Arena, except I would ask whether there is some opportunity, and this question I think is for Director Culver, is there some, we have a pretty big tenant now at the Eddie Bush who uses a sound system. Is there any way we could leverage our relationship with that team to offset some, if not all, of those costs.
Director Culver, under our current lease arrangement, what's the options there?
So through our current lease arrangement, Mr. Mayor, there's a provision for that at year end to sort of have a discussion about leasehold improvements. But I would say that right now in the early stages of the development of the business, the focus is on getting our sponsorship returns from the tenant. So that's where we'll be seeing our revenues, is through the sponsorship that they acquire and use to share with the town.
And as a follow-up to that, where are we at regarding that? I mean, could that be money that we use for this instead?
So through your worship, the revenues currently expected from the junior tenant are budgeted, so they're part of the offsetting to expenses. So that capital, while they may cover the capital request, there would be still a cost against budget. Sense?
I think so. Thank you. I have some yeses and nos as well, although I would not 100% agree with Deputy Mayor Hall's suggestions. I have fewer yeses than nos on my list because I'm trying to be quite careful with people's dollars. We're already, by the way, having done what we've done, I believe we are at a tax increase on an average house of $28.05 before we add another thing. Is that correct, Treasurer Leonard?
Marjorie?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, it is.
So before we even do one more thing on this list, we're at $28 of an increase. And so I will leave my comments there for this moment.
You're not gonna take us through all the others?
Oh, I guess I could if you like.
Let's do that,
Sure.
that's what we're doing.
Okay. I would say that I support number 1. I do not support numbers 2, 3, 4. I support number 5, 6, 7. I am on the fence on number 8. I support number 9. I do not support number 10. I am curious about number 11. I'm not sure how it can be that high, although I have had a conversation with a staff member about that. And I believe that number 11, the winter maintenance, is an estimate, not a firm number at this point.
So let's stop there then and just get clarification. $25,000 for prominent snow removal. I understand that we can't use a truck, so it's a hand-drawn snow blower that's doing it, and is that the basis for the estimate?
Through your worship, yeah, it is an estimate based on hand plowing versus using a machine.
And so I would rather know that a firmer number than that. I would say no to numbers 12, 13, 14, and 15. Yes to numbers 16, 17, and 18. Yes to numbers 19, 20, 21. I would like to see number 24 deferred, and I somehow feel as though it's going to be anyway. I feel as though by the time the traffic calming study is completed, we're not going to be spending the money on number 24 by the end of this fiscal anyway, or be at the end of this calendar regardless. So I feel as though that can come off the list.
Why don't we get clarification of that? Peggy, if we had traffic calming study, what's the anticipated return for that study?
To you, Your Worship. I'm not exactly sure what the anticipated return, but I think that it's a fair point that it will take some time to develop the terms of reference for the study and complete the work. John?
Sorry,
Through the mayor, it depends on what comes out of the study. If we're talking about hard infrastructure that needs to be done during construction season, then perhaps it would be deferred, but low-hanging fruit like signage, maybe pavement markings, things like that could be done next year. But you are right, it could be, depends on what comes out of the study.
Thank you. I would not support number 25 or 20, obviously 26 was deferred already. I've addressed number 27 And on the issue of number 29, I am in support of it in theory, but to circle back to Councillor Jeffrey's discussion regarding support, but at a smaller amount, I think that's where I land on that one. I'd like to see the eager and enthusiastic members of our community who want to be part of this study with perhaps a financial contribution to it. However, I do believe it is vitally important that we do that work, and so however it can get done is what I would support.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? All right. Well then, Councillor Doherty, you've got your hand up. The floor.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. At the risk of seeming like a spendthrift, I believe that, or I would support all but one of these recommendations. And I'll walk you through my general rationale. Number one, we have, at least for the 5 years that I have been on this most recent 2 councils, any number of times have had situations arise or complaints come from residents where things are not being done quick enough, well enough, or at all, based on a lack of staff support. And thus I feel that all of these recommendations are reasonable, and all of them are well rationalized and will help us to advance our business as a corporation. So I have no concern about any of the recommendations relative to staffing. Generally speaking, sorry, I've just completely lost my train of thought.
And we can start with the one you don't agree with.
Okay, thank you. So and it has to do with the capital requests. One for the public works, and then the second one for 507 10th line. And I'm wondering, is it possible that these items could be staggered? Because they are side by side on the 10th line, number one, and number two, they're generally going to benefit public works and parks, rec and culture, or sorry, parks primarily. So if we are able to advance some of the work in 2020, can we defer some of it into 2021?
Our Executive Director, are you able to assist on that?
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. What we have is a report that was received about a year ago with the previous council on our recommended approach to accommodations. Essentially, we're bursting at the seams with respect to staff offices. Over at the library, there's quite a few from the building and planning department that need to be accommodated, and we'd like to repatriate the staff who are downtown in leased accommodation at Sheffer Court. So what this represents in those two proposals, number 20, the Public Works building upgrade, that is actually to take that design one step further. It's largely a study to make sure we're taking the right approach to make that area a single operations center, considering the overall needs of PRC parks, which would include the engineering staff and potentially future water staff that would allow us to make good decisions on the Stewart Street building in the longer term future. It would give council the information required to make decisions on a potentially larger investment in future years. What number 21 does, the 507 10th line upgrade, is to add a number of offices, I believe about 12, in the upper floor of the current Parks building, so that we could accommodate staff without leasing, current staff without leasing additional office space, in part to take care of some of the swing needs we would need during renovations. If we deferred both of those investments, well, if we deferred the number 21, we'd probably be looking at leasing space within the fiscal year, and we could return to, we'd have to come back to council to talk about that after some more study.
Again, just if we deferred the 120 under 20, what would the implications of that be?
If you deferred the 120, we would be looking at a longer term until we understood what we were going to do with our operations center and the Stewart Road property overall. If we were deferred 21, we would be possibly unable to accommodate all of our staff throughout the fiscal year of 2020 and would need to look at some interim lease space.
Thank you. So Councillor Doherty, then you 20 and 21 were the two that you were thinking of deferring, and all the others you were comfortable with. So.
Yeah, that is correct. I feel that we are in an enviable position as a municipality, that our base population is growing, our assessment is growing, and now is the time when we have the money to fulfill our wish list and not wait until such time as we're not experiencing the kind of growth that we're experiencing and needing to implement some of these operating or capital items. And just finally, when I speak with residents, generally, I do not hear people saying that they are concerned about the amount of tax that they are paying. What they are concerned about is value for their tax dollar. And if we don't provide value for tax dollar, that is when we're going to have resident pushback or taxpayer pushback, I believe.
Thank you. Marjorie, perhaps just to keep everyone current, just going off of Councillor Doherty's scenario, and removing the 120 and the 240 from the other items already deferred, what does that leave us in terms of our bottom line and for the total enhancements?
I just have to get my calculator out, Your Worship.
Your Worship, while she's doing the math, I wonder if we might also be sure to be working off of the same page. The notes that I had taken did not include the two additional items that are on the new page that we received today, including the MFA request and the Ontario sidewalk widening. No mention was made of those by Deputy Mayor or by Councillor Jeffrey or by myself.
So those have been added in, they're not assigned a number. Have you got those?
Yeah, I do.
So it's included in blue. 1.7 million.
through you, your worship, if
Yeah.
you remove those two large items, the total enhancements would be $1,811,000, and the average cost to the residential taxpayer would be $122.18, minus the $32.80 that we have sitting there. So it would be a $90 increase on your taxes.
And that's working out an average assessment of how much? 345?
324,
24.
385, I think it is, 324, 385.
Okay, thank you. Council Deputy Mayor.
I'm just wondering if I could ask a specific question to 20 and 21.
Yes.
Just to follow Councillor Doherty. Because I just want to be sure that we're spending money, we're not going to spend whatever that phrase is. Is it staff's opinion that if this was deferred, we're still going to be coming back, or staff would be coming back with a request to go ahead with this particular project in 2021? The reason for the question is, if I just look at an average per square foot of $16 plus MIT for leasing, it doesn't take long to add up the math.
Point taken. Is there any comment from staff on that?
Maybe I can, through your worship, to the Deputy Mayor and to members of council. I think part of the challenge we've got with these two expenditures, and I think they're large, and I've actually went through this with a fine-tooth comb and have had fairly lengthy, very interesting discussions with staff. You would recall the last council we tabled an accommodation study which was reviewed and put out for public consultation, and in that study there's some key recommendations regarding not only providing staff better accommodation, but I think equipping the municipality with the ability to offer better service. So part of this value proposition here is to develop a customer-centric organization where we are doing some modifications to ensure that the physical facilities are conducive to providing that service. The other issue has to do with relocating staff that can maximize some synergies. Right now, we basically are putting staff in offices based on availability. And it's this will allow us to achieve some greater synergies. If we're talking, for example, about better integration between public works and parks and rec, this will allow us to do this through the 10th line upgrade. The issue around the public works building upgrade, that has to do with the better accommodation for our staff in the water department. We could look at some variation of that amount because part of this has to do also with the future of the building that we own on Stewart Road. So I guess at the end of the day, it's council decision as to whether or not they would like us to go back and take a look at this and decide whether or not this is something worth spending money on. But I just want to assure council that we went through this with a sharp pencil and look at whether or not this is something that we could afford not to do, and we've come back with a less than optimum amount of expenditure in 2020, but we can certainly come back in the year with the further requests if council decide to defer these two items.
Just a supplemental comment to that, and that is that I would much rather invest money, whether it's this year or next, in our own buildings that we own. I'm not suggesting it would be this council, it might be the next, but I would not be wanting to be the council that has to go to the public and suggest we need a new $4 million admin building. So I'd much rather spend $360 as opposed to something of that earmark. And for those who think I'm kidding, read the papers as it relates to how long it's taken New Tecumseh to figure out where they're going to build their new admin building.
It's 8 o'clock. Is there any issue around the table of taking a bio break? Give yourself some time and come back with fresh legs. All right, that's let's take 10 minutes, we'll be back here at 10 after 8.